Good day everyone, this is Group 2 and we will be discussing Rizal's life in Europe. And to start, let us understand and be informed about the educational system in Europe where Rizal studied, which is on Lesson 1. As we all know, Europe is one of the most successful continents in the world since most of its countries are industrially developed. Now, however, on 1880s, a huge portion of Europe was deemed illiterate. This is because the educational system there was very poor. Though maraming major improvements na nangyayari sa countries inside Europe, especially in Spain, the educational system there remained traditional, which is why primary and secondary schools were stuck in their old ways, in their old and ineffective ways of teaching, which is being forced to be bookish rather than be enthusiastic. So unlike sa educational system today, which is ginahatagan tag privilege na i-showcase ang atuang skills as individuals, students before were not given the same chance since they were all dependent on memorization. Since nag-focus sila sa education, kay walay extracurricular activities before. And aside from the educational system being more on the traditional side, isa po sa causes nga nung poor ang quality sa education in Europe before was because numerous professors of universities had multiple jobs. And this means na hindi nila mahatagan og more focus ang ilahang pagtudlo or teaching. And aside from that, mas ginhatagan po nila og significance or mas importansya ang ilang political career instead of teaching. Also before, aside from the educational system being more on the traditional side, only a few people could afford to send their children at school since dili free ang education before, unlike now. And also, churches made efforts to exclude irreligious teachings from school. These teachings include those pwede nila ma-learn nga modify sa ilahang religious beliefs like science. This is why the educational advancement in Europe at that time was hard to attain. And also, the churches there held a tantamount amount of power and were influential enough to leave Spanish universities stagnant or unchanging and old style. This movement prevented students from acquiring greater knowledge than the parishes. So, nganong ginabuhat nila? Ginabuhat nila to somehow lessen the chances of revolts and questioning of the mandates of the church and its effective ruling. Since before, dako jud og power ang churches compared to government officials. But at that stagnant and oldish ways of learning, progress had begun at the end of 1880s, wherein there was renewal of Spain's university life. So by that time, Filipinos began to arrive at Spain and were able to acquire deeper knowledge about the Spanish ways. So it happened around 1880s and 1890s when Spain opened its doors to Filipinos. So being able to know Spain at that time, Filipino students were able to understand the dealings of Spain's laws and policies in the Philippines. So, wala lang siya nagstay sa iyang traditional way of learning. So, eventually, nag-progress siya, nag-shift siya from traditional to modern way of learning to give way to progress. No? They were able to interact more when they were in the Philippines and the ideas became free-flowing. I think this is the time when Rizal started to study in Spain. After shifting to the modern way of teaching, rejection and evaluation of the abuses of the church and state in the Philippines were opened in class. So as I have mentioned kanina, the church back then made efforts to exclude irreligious teachings from schools. This is to prevent the students from acquiring greater knowledge than them. Para dili sila makabalo sa ilahang mga defective rulings o kanang mga questionable mandates na ginahatag nila sa public. And since nag-progress naman ang educational system sa Europe in later 1880s, na booking rapod sila, no? And Proclamation of Liberty burned the desires of Filipino students who were awakened to the truth of the Spanish ruling. So diri sila nakamata, diri sila nakabalo na dili tanan teaching sa church is tama. So since ang uban ilahang gina-abuse ang ilahang power to take to take charge of others. No, hence, the aspiration for independence and Philippine liberty strengthened and numerous church dogmas were rejected. This is the time na daghan na nag-revolt against sa churches, especially at that time since mas powerful ang churches compared to government officials.
Now moving on to lesson 2 where we will discuss about Rizal as a student activist. So, during 1880, while still a student in the Philippines, Jose Rizal exhibited his leadership in student activism while still studying philosophy and medicine at UST. So, Jose Rizal heavily criticized the humiliating treatment towards Filipino students by friars or by the Dominicans, such as calling them Indio or Chongo. In response, he and his friends defended the rights of these Filipino students and called the Spanish or the Mestizo students Bangus or Castilla. These two groups in UST were then bitterly hostile to one another. Later on, Jose Rizal also founded a secret society or student organization known as Compañerismo or Compañerismo de Ehu, and this name is derived from the Hebrew general. Gallicano Apicible also then described this group as a group that encouraged its members to learn about civic and patriotic issues and to assist one another. On the other hand, Marcelo H. Del Pilar also used this student organization or secret society to fight for freedom against the friars' intrusion into local government activities. Even before departing for Spain, he even set up a Comité de Propaganda, a group that is dedicated with destroying propaganda materials with the help of these students or with the help of the secret society. In addition, Rizal's outspoken criticism of his era's flawed and outdated university curriculum served as another example of his activism.
So moving on to the topic of Luna and Hidalgo's achievement. So here are the 4 W's about the topic that I'll be tackling in this video. So what? This is to toast or say a few words of congrats to the both Hidalgo and Luna. Where? This happened at Restaurant Ingles, Madrid. When did this happen? This happened on June 25, 1889 at the evening. And why? This is to celebrate Juan Luna and Felix Resurrection Hidalgo of them winning something at the contest. So, the first painting is made by Juan Luna, which is called Spolarium. This painting won a gold medal. And the second painting is called The Virgins Christiana, which was made by Felix Hidalgo and won a silver medal. So, at that evening, Rizal spoke. So, according to Rizal, Luna and Hidalgo's achievement illuminated the two ends of España and the Filipinas. He claims the change is coming. It was also said that they are the symbol of peace and a bond of love between nations and is called the creative geniuses. There are also the precious examples, a generous hopes at that time. So here is the Venn diagram about the similarities and the differences of both paintings of Luna and Hidalgo. So in Luna's painting, which is the Spolarium, it depicts um, oppression, right? Oppression rather, and it is not mute, and the painting is dark. In Hidalgo's painting, it depicts melancholy rather, and beauty, frailty of victims of brutal force, and the painting is light. The similarities of the both paintings is humanity subjected to severe tests and injustice. So in Rizal's speech, there is uh, there is something behind. There's something behind about that speech. So political appeal disguised as a toast is behind what Rizal spoke. There also appeal for equality and brotherhood between Spaniards and Indios. The speech also opened the eyes of his countrymen to the abuses of the Spaniards, and the speech was meant to the Indios and Spaniard or the Spanish government. That will be all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am your reporter for today's topic. I am Kuzome Quiroga, and now we will be discussing a topic entitled the propaganda movement. But before that, let's first define what is a propaganda. Okay, propaganda it is a message designed to persuade its intended audience to think and behave in a certain manner. And also it's the spreading of in support of a cause and the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or enduring an institution, cause, or a person. In other words, when we say propaganda, it's a dissemination of information, facts, arguments, half-truths, or lies to influence the public opinion. That is a propaganda. Now we're done defining what is propaganda. Now let's move on and discuss the propaganda movement. What are the events happened in the propaganda movement? Who are the people behind the creation of the propaganda movement? What is propaganda movement? Propaganda movement, it is a peaceful crusade or campaign for reforms and was done by means of pen and tongue to pressure the Spanish government. And it was organized and participated by the Ilustrados. Propaganda movement, it is a literary and cultural organization way back 1872 by the Filipinos emigres who had settled in Europe. Its aims is to increase the Spanish awareness of the needs of its colony and to propagate a closer relationship between the colony and the Spain. What is the goal of the propaganda movement? The goal of the propaganda movement it is about the equal status and opportunities for both Filipinos and Spaniards, especially when entering to a government service. And it's the creation of a public school system independent of the friars. A propaganda movement, it was not a radical agitation to overthrow the Spanish rule by bloody revolution, but the propaganda movement, it just a peaceful campaign. They were not create this nationalist movement for a bloody revolution, but it's they call on for a political reforms. Okay, now we're have an idea of a propaganda movement. Now let's discuss what are the reasons behind na gipursue nila or create nila ng propaganda movement. There are three reasons. First is the Cavite Mutiny, and the third is the execution of the three priests or called Gomborza, and the third is the liberal rule of Carlos Maria de la Torre. And it awakes the Filipinos and inspired the organization of the propaganda movement na ipursue na nila na nationalist movement. Rise of the propaganda movement. The rising of the propaganda movement began in 1872 when the fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora were executed at the Luneta. This is the one of the reason why nag-start na ang propaganda movement, because of the execution or the public execution of these three priests. And not just the execution of the three priests, but also the Cavite Mutiny. On January 20, 1872, about 200 Filipino soldiers and dock workers of Cavite, under the leadership of Sergeant La Madrid, mutinied and killed their Spanish officers. Fathers Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, Jacinto Zamora were accused of treason to Spain and tried an unfair trial, and they were sentenced to death by garrote on February 17, 1872 in Bagong Bayan. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime under the reactionary governor Rafael de Escuerdo magnified the incident and used it as an excuse to clamp down those Filipinos who had been calling for a governmental reform. There are number of Filipinos intellectuals were seized and accused of complicity with the mutineers. Like what I've said earlier, there were brief trial, and then they decided that they were sentenced, the three priests, to death by the garrote in February 17, 1872. They were publicly executed. And these three priests subsequently became martyrs to the cause of the Philippine independence rather. What are the reforms desired by the propaganda movement? There are 5 reforms desired of the propaganda movement. First is equality. They call out for the equality of the Filipinos and the Spaniards before the law. And next is the human rights for the Filipinos, restoration of Philippine representation in the Spanish courts, Philippinization of the Philippine parishes and expulsion of the friars, and the last one is the assimilation of the Philippines as a regular province of Spain. The people behind this propaganda movement desired, or there are change that happened in this nationalist movement. Here are kaning 5 muni ilahang desired or the political reform nila na gi-desired sa ilahang propaganda movement. Who were active in this movement? Sino ba yung mga tao? Prominent leaders? Who are the members? What kind of a member are there sa propaganda movement? So the active in this movement are the propagandists. So what is propagandist? What kind of people are the propagandists? So they are patriots who wage their movement by means of pen and tongue to expose the defects of Spanish rule in the Philippines and urgency of reforms to remedy them. They were the people that has a science of good families, highly intelligent, educated, patriotic, and courageous, who symbolize the flower of Filipino manhood. And here are the 3 forms of groups of propagandists. Filibusteros, the young men, and the refugees. Who are the filibusteros? They were included in the Creoles and Spanish mestizos who had been expelled in Marianas during attack on liberals in the wake of Cavite Mutiny. And the young men, they were sent for Spain for their studies. And the refugees, they are the people who escaped the islands to break out the persecution. Here are the prominent leaders of the propaganda movement. Let's start with Marcelo H. del Pilar. Who is Marcelo H. del Pilar? Marcelo H. del Pilar, he is an editor of the La Solidaridad, and also he is a lawyer and a journalist beloved by the masses for his eloquent Tagalog and fearless defense of the poor against friar abuses. He wrote the Kaingat kayo, dasalan at tuksohan, and ang 10 kautusan ng mga praile. That is Marcelo H. del Pilar. Next prominent leader is Dr. Rizal. Dr. Jose Rizal, he write the Noli Me Tangere and the El Filibusterismo, which is a very controversial book until now. He is the most outstanding propagandist and a great novelist of the propaganda movement. Next is Graciano Lopez Haina. Graciano Lopez Haina, he is a brilliant orator and he wrote the Fray Butod, Esperanza, and he is also the publisher of the La Solidaridad. Last one is Mariano Ponce. Mariano Ponce is also a prominent leader of the propaganda movement. Mariano Ponce, he is a medical student and also a biographical writer. Okay, the end of the propaganda movement. The end of the propaganda movement, these are the following events happen. In July 7, 1892, General Eugenio Despujol ordered the arrest and imprisonment at Fort Santiago. And in July 15, he was put in the exile into the Pitan, and December 30, 1896, executed in Bagong Bayan. Ito yung nangyari kang Dr. Rizal. Mark the fall of the La Liga Filipina. When Rizal's arrest, it marks the crucial period of the propagandist. It's the propaganda movement is an overall failure. And after that, yung na-arrest na si Rizal and Rizal was been executed. Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Graciano Lopez Haina died in Barcelona in 1896. But despite this overall failure of the propaganda movement, it generated a political consciousness that fed into the nationalist revolution in 1896. Yes, the end mark is the beginning. Although the propaganda movement is end, but it is called as a beginning. Kasi the writings by the propaganda movement na inspired si Andres Bonifacio. Dito na naman dumating si Andres Bonifacio. And then he established the Katipunan and set the Philippine Revolution into place. So this was the tragic events happened in the propaganda movement. I hope you all has many learnings about this topic. This is the end of my discussion, and I provide here some references if you want to know more about the propaganda. And the second reference is a video na makita sa YouTube na if ever mas gunahan mo na, you will see a video jud sa mga event na nangyari sa propaganda movement. This is the end of my report. I hope you all doing well. And
moving on to our next lesson, lesson 5, where we will discuss about the organization of La Solidaridad. So on December 31st, 1888, an organization called La Solidaridad was founded. It was headed by Galicano Apacible and Graciano Lopez Haina. And in February 15, 1889, they published an official newspaper that has the same name, La Solidaridad, in Barcelona, Spain. And at this time, Rizal stood as their honorary president while he was still in England. So this newspaper did not only publish articles and essays about economy, politics, culture, and social conditions of the country, but also current news locally and internationally, and speeches of prominent Spanish leaders about the Philippines. So the La Solidaridad, mostly composed of Filipino liberals who were exiled in 1872 and students attending Europe's universities. So the members are the following: Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Haina, Antonio Luna, Jose Maria Panganiban, Mariano Ponce, Pedro Paterno, Antonio Maria Regidor, Isabelo de los Reyes, Eduardo Delete, Jose Alejandrino, Jose Luis Guerra, Robert Lacamra, Andres Bonifacio, Dr. Miguel Moraita, and Ferdinand Blumentritt. So published fortnightly, it served as the principal organ of the reform movement for 6 years. And its funds came from the Comité de Propaganda in the Philippines. And Rizal was the first offered to the position of editorship. However, he declined because he was very busy with annotating Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinos in London. So in the end, Cristiano Lopez Haina showed interest in becoming the editor. And in April 25, 1889, La Solidaridad published the letter entitled The Aspiration of the Filipinos, which was written by the Asociación Hispano-Filipina de Madrid. It pursued desires for representation in the court or cortes, abolition of censure, and an express and definite prohibition of existing practices of exiling residents by purely administrative order and without a right or execution from the courts of justice. So, in December 15, 1889, Marcelo H. Del Pilar replaced Cristiano Lopez Haina as the editor of La Solidaridad. Under his editorship, the aims of the newspaper expanded and drew the attention of politicians and even Spanish ministers. Using propaganda, it pursued desires for that the Philippines be a province of Spain, representation Filipino priest instead of Spanish friars in parishes and remote sitios, freedom of assembly and speech, equal rights before the law. So, after years of publication from 1889 to 1895, La Solidaridad had begun to run out of funds, so it ceased publication on November 15, 1895 with 7 volumes and 160 issues. So, La Solidaridad. So, what are their aims for forming this organization? So, they aim to work peacefully for political and social reforms, to portray the deplorable conditions of the Philippines and force Spain to remedy them, to oppose the evil forces of reaction and medievalism, to advocate liberal ideas and progress, and to champion the legitimate aspirations of the Filipino people to life, democracy, and happiness.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Bakatkat and Section 1D in Hospitality Management. So for today, my topic is all about failure of the propaganda movement. The failure of the propaganda movement. The propaganda movement failed to secure the desire of reforms, especially the expulsion of the fires and their replacement by Filipino circular press and equality before the law between Spaniards and Filipinos. Largely because the Spanish friar used their power and sources to thwart the activities of the Filipino. The propaganda movement in 1872 and 1892 was the first Filipino nationalist movement led by a Filipino elite and inspired by the nationalist activism of figures such as Jose Burgos and by his execution of the hand of colonial authorities. Why did the propaganda movement start? The propaganda movement was a cultural organization formed in 1872 by six sect patriots in Europe, composed of the Ilustrados, exiled liberals, and students attending Europe universities and gravitated to movement. Reason why the propaganda movement failed. First, internal conflicts were present between propagandist Rizal and Del Pilar, which led to the backing out of Del Pilar. Second, the leaders were ambitious and somewhat greedy. They did some reforms, but those reforms were only for their benefits. The propaganda movement was a set of communication actions through books, leaflets, and newspaper articles by a group Filipinos who called for political reforms. That's all.
So hi guys, my name is Josephine Faith D. Bruno and I will be discussing about Marcelo H. Del Pilar as a delegate of the propaganda. So first, we will be discussing about Marcelo H. Del Pilar's life. He was actually born in Cupang, Bulacan on August 30, 1850. He studied at the Colegio de San Juan and at the University of Santo Tomas, where he obtained his law degree in 1880. So the objectives of the propaganda movement were promoted by Marcelo, who also worked to ensure that the Philippines had representation in the Spanish Cortes and to rein in the powers and abuses of the Spanish friars. So he actually did it in two ways. So first is through his writings, and the second one is by organizing local communities against candidates of the friars. He is also known by his pen name, which is Plaridel, and Marcelo's organizing skills and Tagalog fluency, particularly in his new humorous writings, were quite powerful. The Governor General Roman Blanco also called him the most dreadful of the Filipino politicians, the true voice of the separates, very superior to Rizal. So he was actually a lawyer, a mason, and a pamphleteer, one of the voices and leaders of the peaceful reform movement. In 1872, he was exiled to Guam with his brother, Father Toribio del Pilar. He desired to uplift the welfare of his countrymen through preaching, work, and self-dignity in public places. And in 1882, he actually established the nationalist newspaper, which is Jaryong Tagalog. He also wrote various anti-clerical pamphlets, which is the Kaiigat Kayo, Dasalan at Tuksuhan, Kadakilaan ng Diyos, La Sobriana Monacal, and La Philocracia Filipinas. In October 1888, Del Pilar left for Spain to avoid arrest and imprisonment. In Barcelona, he joined other expatriate Filipinos such as Jose Rizal, Mariano Ponce, Graciano Lopez Haina, and the Luna brothers, which is Juan and Antonio. They initiated the reform movement and convinced some Spanish legislators to support the changes and desires. And publication and propaganda were made to fuel such plan. Marcelo took over the leadership or the editorship of La Solidaridad after Graciano Lopez Haina. He is an official delegate also of Spain of the Comité de Propaganda de Manila. He had two stages of the committee's propaganda with him. First is to use legal and peaceful campaign to win the heart of Spain. and provide a seat for the Philippines in the Cortes to advance the desires and reforms for the country. The second one is they raise Filipinos' awareness in the Philippines and inspire them to join the movement that eventually opened the door for uprising. The La Solidaridad was an effective propaganda. Numerous indigenous people supported it, and it depended in relation to political transactions of the Spanish administration that appeared to be cruel toward natives in the Philippines. Marcelo studied and evaluated the Spanish political setup to invite more Filipinos to join to the propaganda. The stage included the expulsion of friars in the Philippines. So it actually influenced numerous Spanish politicians and a good tool in going against the friars' prominence in the Philippines. On April 2, 1889, the Grand Master of the Gran Oriente Español, Miguel Moraita, received a petition from the Masonic Lodge, which is the revolution founded by the Filipinos and Barcelona, asking for their lodge connections with his federation. So Marcelo actually exerted enormous an effort to make La Solidaridad more effective and encouraging the reforms in the Philippines. He worked hard to keep the eyes of the masses focused on the propaganda movement and to keep La Solidaridad running. So, majority of the famous patriots supported the leadership of Del Pilar not only in the propaganda but also in the establishment and management of Philippine Masonry, all for the liberty of the country through the power of the press. Well, sadly, on July 4, 1896, he was died because of the tuberculosis. So that's about Marcelo H. Del Pilar as a delegate propaganda. Thank you.
So hello everyone, welcome to Module 5, the Rizal's life, featuring the exile, trial, and death. By the way, I am Grace Mary of Group 2. For today's presentation, I'm going to discuss and share to you about the Lesson 1, which is the homecoming. But before I start it, let me read to you our specific objectives. So at the end of the lesson, the students will be able to first, identify the factors that led to Rizal's capture, trial, and death. Second, analyze the analysis of the analyst about Rizal's captures, trial, and execution. So as early as 1884, Rizal wanted to go back to the Philippines, first because of the financial difficulties in Calamba. So after Rizal's departure for Spain, Calamba is experiencing the worst situation wherein the harvest of rice and sugarcane failed due to account of drought and locust, where it caused a severe economic disaster which resulted to the increase of rentals of the lands cultivated by the Rizal family, where somehow it affects his monthly allowances, which is late, and there are times that they did not even arrive at all. Second is the dissatisfaction with his students in Madrid. Third is the desire to prove that there is no reason to fear going home. And the last one is his belief that the Spanish regime will not punish the innocent. So it was on June 29, 1887 in Rome when Rizal wrote to his father announcing his homecoming. Though he is being warned by his brother named Pasiano and some relatives alike, but still Rizal is determined to go back to the Philippines for his personal reasons. First, it is to operate his mother's eyes, because his mother was turning blind and he desired to give her back her vision. One of his motivation to become a doctor was to cure his mother that is close to be blind due to cataract. So cataract is a cloudy lens where the lens is positioned behind the colored part of your eye or the iris. Second is to serve his people that is being oppressed by the Spaniards. because he wanted to heal his countrymen from the blindness by the oppressive foreign power of the Spanish friars. Third is to find out how Noli affected the Filipinos and Spaniards in the Philippines. So as expected, his first novel delighted Filipinos but scandalized and enraged the powerful friars in the Philippines. So Rizal shows the shocking extent to which the Catholic friars have commanded the country's politics and culture, manipulating the lives of Filipino citizens in an attempt to assert authority and influence, which angered the friars because it exposed the bad deeds of the friars in the country. And the last one is to inquire why Leonor Rivera remained silent. So the reason for Leonor Rivera's silence was the connivance between Rivera's mother and an Englishman named Henry Charles Keeping, a railway engineer who fell in love with Leonor Rivera and was favored by Rivera's mother. So in Rizal's delightful trip to Manila, Marseilles is a French port that Rizal rode from Rome. So on July 3, 1887, Rizal boarded the steamer Gemna, and the same steamer which brought him to Europe 5 years ago. So July 30, 1887, at Saigon, when Rizal transferred to another steamer, which is the Haipong, that brought him to Manila. So near midnight of August 5, 1887, the Haipong arrived in Manila. So exactly August 8, 1887, when Rizal returned to Calamba. In Calamba, Rizal established a medical clinic where his mother was his first patient. He came to be called Dr. Oliman. So Oliman means German. So Rizal opened a gymnasium for young folks and introduced some European sports, which is the fencing and the shooting, to discourage them from cockfighting and gambling. So Rizal suffered one failure during his 6 months of sojourn in Calamba, and it is his failure to see Leonor Rivera. In addition, Rizal was compelled to leave Calamba because his presence in Calamba was jeopardizing the safety and happiness of his friends in year 1888. So for the second time, Rizal arrived at Manila on June 26, 1892, Sunday at 12 noon, together with his widowed sister named Lucia, the wife of late Mariano Herbosa. Later on, he started visiting his friends in central Luzon and so on. Upon returning home, Rizal founded a non-violent reform society, which is the Liga Filipina in Manila, and was deported to the Dapitan in northwest Mindanao and remained exiled for the next 4 years. So I have now come to the end of my presentation, and now I'll give the floor to my co-presenter. I hope you learned what I spoke about my topic. Thank you, and it's a wrap.
Good day, everyone. My name is Vince, and I'm here to discuss the life of Rizal in Dapitan. So, on July 7, 1892, Governor General Olugio Despojo made a public order of deportation of Dr. Jose Rizal to Dapitan through a decree published in Gaceta to the remote town of Zamboanga. So, Dr. Jose Rizal is serving his political exile issued by the Governor General Olugio Despojo and by the Spanish government, and arrives on board on the steamer. So, during the deportation to Dapitan, is Dr. Jose Rizal carried a letter from Father Pablo Pastels, the superior of the Jesuit Society in the Philippines, to be given to Father Antonio Bach, the parish priest of Dapitan. So, in the letter that carried by Dr. Rizal states that if Rizal could follow these conditions is he could live in the parish church. So the conditions were if he publicly retract his errors concerning religion and make statements that were clearly pro-Spanish and against revolution. Uh, he performed the church rites and general confession of his wrongdoings. And the third conditions is he conduct himself in an exemplary manner as a Spanish subject and a man of religion. So, Dr. Rizal didn't agree in these three conditions, so he lived in the house of Capitan Carcinero. So, Capitan Carcinero is a warden and a political commandant who later became a close friend and a guardian to Dr. Jose Rizal. So, on August 26, 1892, during the birthday of Capitan Carcinero, Dr. Jose Rizal wrote a poem about him entitled Don Ricardo Carcinero. So, on September 21, 1892, the steamboat had finally made its way to the shore of Dapitan. So when they land on the Dapitan is that Dr. Jose Rizal win the lottery number 9763, which was jointly owned by Capitan Carcinero and Francisco Iquilor. So they won the second prize of 20,000 pesos in the government-owned Manila lottery, and Dr. Jose Rizal got his share of 6,200 pesos, in which he gave the 200 pesos to his friend Basa, who based on Hong Kong. 2,000 pesos was he gave it to his father, and the rest of the money was invested on the agricultural land of Talisay. So during his exile in Dapitan Dr. Rizal and Father Pastel had a long and scholarly debate regarding on religion. So this debate had started when Father Pastel sent a book work by Sarda to Dr. Rizal, and in the book it states that the latter should abstain from his mahaderas in viewing religion from the prism of individual judgment and self-esteem. So, this is where the debate of Dr. Rizal and Father Pastel started by giving Father Pastel by Father Pastel sent the book to Dr. Rizal. So, despite his anti-feelings for the Catholic Church, is that Dr. Jose Rizal still continued his Catholic routine, like going to church, celebrating the Christmas and other Catholic-related fiestas. So, Dr. Jose Rizal got involved also in quarrel with a French businessman named Juan Lardet. So, Mr. Juan Lardet expressed his anger by writing a letter to the friend of Rizal, Antonio Miranda, and in the letter it states that if Rizal is a truthful man, he would have informed me that the lumber not included in the account were bad. So in what the letter states is this angered Dr. Jose Rizal, and he declared a duel to the Frenchman businessman. So but thanks to Captain Carcinero, the duel had been ceased, and also Juan Lardet sent a letter to Dr. Rizal an apology, and both of them became friends. So Father Francisco de Paula Sanchez is one of the favorite teacher of Dr. Jose Rizal when he studied in Ateneo, and Father Sanchez came to Dapitan assigned by the Jesuit to convince Jose Rizal to change his view to the Catholic Church. Father Sanchez and Dr. Jose Rizal had theological arguments, but in a friendly way. But still, Father Sanchez failed to persuade Dr. Rizal to discard his unorthodox views on the Catholic Church. So, despite the failure of Father Sanchez, he still helped and assist Dr. Jose Rizal in helping community in Dapitan and beautifying the town plaza. So, during the birthday of Father Sanchez is that Rizal gave him a gift, a manuscript entitled Estudio sobre la Lengua Tagala. So, these are the idyllic life of Jose Rizal in Dapitan. So, on August 1893, the family members of Dr. Jose Rizal came to visit him and live with him for at least a year and a half. So, among them is his mother, Doña Teodora, and his three sisters, Trinidad, Maria, and Narcisca. So, Dr. Jose Rizal built a house by seashore of Talisay, 1 kilometer away from the Dapitan, and the house was surrounded with fruit trees. So, Dr. Jose Rizal had another house for the schoolboys and for the patients. So, on December 19, 1893, Dr. Jose Rizal wrote a letter to Mr. Blumentritt, one of Rizal's close companion, and the letter is all about his life in Dapitan. So, earlier on November, a man claimed to be Dr. Jose Rizal's relative known as Pablo Mercado. So, Pablo Mercado visited Rizal at night on November 3, 1893, and this man showed a photo of Rizal and his initials to show he is connected to Rizal's family. But Dr. Rizal seems suspicious about that man because the man had asked him to be his message courier. So, later that day, Dr. Rizal found out that the man is still on the island, and he sought help of Comandante Juan Sitges. Comandante Juan Sitges is the replacement of Capitan Carcinero as a commandment of Dapitan on May 4, 1893. So, Pablo Mercado was arrested, and during an interview, he revealed his true name, Florencio Namanan, and he also revealed that he was hired by the Recollect friars to spy on the activities and the work of Rizal. So when Rizal was still on the Dapitan as an exile, he contributed a lot of things. So, these are the examples. Dr. Rizal as a physician. So, Dr. Rizal operated his mother's eye, and it was a success operation. And Don Ignacio Tumarong, a rich Filipino, also regained his eyesight thanks to the operation of Dr. Rizal and paid 3,000 pesos. And Don Florencio Azacaraga, a rich haciendero and Englishman patient, was cured from eye ailment and paid 500 pesos and a cargo of sugar. So, Dr. Jose Rizal had also a talent as a inventor. So, Dr. Jose Rizal applied his engineering skills by constructing a system of waterworks in order to furnish clean water to the townspeople. And in community projects in Dapitan, he spent many months draining the marshes to get rid of malaria that infested the townspeople, and used his 500 pesos that was being paid by a patient to equip the town with its lighting system, and he also beautified the plaza of Dapitan. So, he also taught the boys in reading, writing, languages, geography, mathematics, history, morals, and industrial works to the to the to the people of uh, Dapitan. And in 1893, he established a school which existed until the end of his exile on July 1896. So, Dr. Rizal also wrote a poem to the people of Talisay entitled Hymno a Talisay or Hymn to Talisay. So, Rizal also contributed as a farmer. He acquired more lands in his total holdings reach up to 70 hectares with containing 6,000 hemp plants and 1,000 coconut trees and numerous fruit trees, sugarcane, and cacao. He also introduced modern methods of agriculture to the town people of Dapitan and encouraged the farmers of Dapitan to discard the primitive system and adopt modern methods in agricultural through the use of agricultural machinery which was imported in the United States. He also in the partnership with the Dapitan merchant Ramon Carrion, Rizal made a profitable business ventures in fishing, copras, and hemp industries. The hemp industry became the most profitable business ventures in the Dapitan. So he also contributes in science. Dr. Rizal explored the coast and jungles with his students, riding his baroto for seeking specimens of insects, birds, lizards, snakes, and plants. He builds up a rich collection of conchology like shells. His scientist versatility was limitless. He already conducted anthropological, archaeological, geological, and geographical studies and when he was exiled on Dapitan. He also continued his studies in language in Dapitan where he learned Bisayan, Subanum, and Malay languages. With his 22 languages he knew, the Tagalog, Ilocano, Bisayan, Spanish, Latin, Greek, English, French, German, Arabic, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Dutch, Catalan, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Swedish, and Russian. So, during his exile on Dapitan, Dr. Rizal had a void in his heart due to the death of his sister, Leonora Rivera, on August 28, 1893. At that time, 18 years old Irish girl came into his life like a sunbeam, and both of them in love at first sight. So, after a whirlwind of romance in the past months, they both agreed to marry each other. So, Dr. Jose Rizal wrote a poem to his lover entitled Josephine and live happily in Dapitan, but that happy moments will end up in a tragedy. So, because of this incident. So, when Josephine was expecting a baby, she gave birth early, premature baby, and died after 3 hours. It was on early part of 1896. So, on February 1895, Doña Tridora regained her eyesight and returned to Manila. So, on October 22, 1895, Rizal wrote a poem about his serene life as an exile in Dapitan and sent it to her mother. So, the poem was entitled as Mi Retiro, or known as My Retreat. So, on December 17, 1895, Dr. Rizal had offered his service as a military doctor on Cuba. Then he wrote a letter to Governor General Ramon Blanco. The month passed and he received no reply to the Malacanang. So, on July 1, 1896, he received a note from Governor General Ramon Blanco notifying him in the acceptance of his offer. So, At last, he was free from the exile and going to travel to Europe, then Cuba. So, because of his joyful moment, he then wrote a poem entitled El Canto del Viajero, so known as the Song of the Traveler. So on July 31, 1896, Rizal's 4 year of exile in Dapitan came to an end. At midnight, he embarked on board on the steamer known as España, and as the steamer pushed, Rizal gazed last time in the Dapitan, waving his hand in farewell with a crying heart filled with nostalgic moments. So, if you want to know more about his life during his exile in Dapitan, you can search in this link. And for the next topic that will be discussed by Miss Sofia.
Good day, I am Maria Sofia Itak, and this time I will be tackling about Rizal's connection with the Katipunan and how this became a factor that led to Rizal's capture, trial, and death. So it was on the night of Rizal's arrest and his deportation to Dapitan in 1892 when a self-educated man of humble origins, Andres Bonifacio, decided that the Philippines will only achieve independence through revolution. Reason why he founded the Katipunan, officially known as Kataas-taasan, Kagalang-galangang Katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan. So it was a secret society committed to winning independence against Spain through revolution. On June 21, 1896, Bonifacio's emissary Dr. P. Valenzuela visited Rizal in Dapitan and informed him of the plan of the Katipunan, which is to launch a revolution. Rizal actually objected to Bonifacio's bold project, stating that such would be a veritable suicide. He even emphasized that the Katipunan leaders should do everything possible to prevent premature flow of native blood. However, he senses that revolutionary leaders were determined on launching their audacious project, and Valenzuela warned him that the revolution will inevitably break out if the Katipunan would be discovered. Hearing this, Rizal suggested to Valenzuela that it would be for the best interest of the Katipunan to get first the support of the rich and influential people of Manila to strengthen their cause. He even suggested that Antonio Luna should direct the military operations of the revolution with his knowledge of military science and tactics. But prior to that incident, in February 1895, Cubans started revolution for independence against another Spanish colony. Along this revolution happening in Cuba against Spanish colony, Rizal volunteered to serve as a doctor for the Spanish army in Cuba to escape from his exile. And this offer of Rizal was accepted in 1896. However, just as he left for Cuba by ship, the Spanish learned the existence of the revolutionary society Katipunan because of the untimely discovery by a Spanish friar on August 19, 1896. The bloody arrest of hundreds of Katipuneros was then started, and Bonifacio had little choice but to raise the cry of revolution in the hills of Balintawak on August 26, 1896. The same day when the state of war was proclaimed in the 8 provinces, Rizal received from Governor General Blanco the 2 identical letters of introduction for the Minister of War and Minister of Colonies, with a covering letter which discharged him from all blame for the raging revolution. He happily continued the voyage towards Barcelona, not until he became a victim of Spanish duplicity, causing for him to be arrested. That would be furtherly discussed by the next report. So again, Rizal was not actually involved in the Katipunan. He even denounced the group, disagreeing with the cause. However, he was considered as its honorary president and served as an inspiration to its member. And this became a factor for his capture, trial, and death because despite of him being not in favor of the revolution, Spanish government falsely blamed Rizal for the insurgents and ordered his arrest during his travel to Cuba. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I am Laika H. Kilat, and for the next topic, I will be presenting to you Rizal's last trip abroad. So in the previous lesson, you learned about Rizal and the Katipunan and how Andres Bonifacio sought help and informed Rizal about their plan to launch a revolution against the Spaniards. So in this lesson, we will be looking back at the journey of Rizal to his last trip to Spain. We will taste a little nostalgia from the past and will sail to the ocean along with Rizal. So Rizal's last trip abroad. So there is no longer an exile for Rizal in the Pitan, and during the peak of the Cuban Revolution, Rizal offered his services as a military doctor to compromise with the shortage of physicians in the said country, and it was his friend Ferdinand Blumentritt who informed him of the situation in Cuba and suggested that he volunteer himself as an army doctor. But things really didn't go exactly as planned because there were circumstances, there were changes that happened. So on his journey to Spain, he has stopovers in different provinces, and we will know what happened and what Rizal did in his stopovers. So Rizal has a pleasant trip from Dapitan to Manila, and his stopovers are the provinces of Dumaguete, Cebu, Iloilo, Capiz, and Romblon. So from Dapitan to Manila, leaving Dapitan at midnight, July 31, 1896, the España, which is the ship, with Rizal and party on board sailed northward. At dawn the next day, it anchored at Dumaguete, capital of Negros Occidental. So when he arrived in Dumaguete, Rizal wrote something in his travel diary saying, "Spreads out on the beach there are big houses, some with galvanized iron roofing. Outstanding are the house of a lady whose name I've forgotten, which is occupied by the government, and another one just begun with ipil posts." So in Dumaguete, Rizal visited a friend and former classmate, Regidor, who was the judge of the province. He also visited other friends, including Periquet and Rufina families. So the next stop of Rizal was in Cebu. So the España left Dumaguete about 1 p.m. and reached Cebu of the following morning. So Rizal was fascinated by the entrance of Cebu, which he considered beautiful, and he even met an old couple whom had known in Madrid. So one thing that I observed is that every time he arrives at a certain place, he will write something in his diary, just like what he did in when he's in Dumaguete. And I think it's to keep his memories of that place from his journey with him, from his journey. So in the morning of Monday, August 3, Rizal left Cebu going to Iloilo. He then wrote something in his diary saying, "The voyage was fine. At the right, we saw Mactan, an island famous for what happened to Magellan. The whole afternoon was magnificent. We saw many islands along our way. The next day in the morning, we entered Iloilo. So Rizal landed at Iloilo and he went in the city and visited Molo. So when in Molo Church, he commented, "The church is pretty outside and the interior is not bad considering that it had been painted by a lad. The paintings are mostly copies of biblical scenes by Gustave Dor. From Iloilo, Rizal's ship sailed to Capiz, and after a brief stopover, it proceeded towards Manila via Romblon. And on August 6, 1896, the España arrived at the Manila Bay early morning. But unfortunately, Rizal was not able to catch up the mail ship, which is the Isla de Luzon, because it had departed the previous day at 5 p.m. So Rizal wasn't able to catch up the ship going to Spain. So he messaged his friend Ferdinand Blumentritt that he didn't catch up the mail ship. So the letter says, "Unfortunately, I didn't catch the mail ship for Spain, and fearing that my stay for a month in Manila would bring me trouble, I made known to Governor General while remaining on board the ship España of my wish to be isolated from everybody except my family." And on the same day, near midnight on August 6, Rizal was transferred to the Spanish cruiser Castilla by order of the Governor General Ramon Blanco. Rizal stayed on the cruiser for about a month, from August 6 to September 1869, pending the availability of Spain-bound steamer. So, from the España, Rizal was transferred to the cruiser Castilla, and then there he waited for the other Spain-bound steamer that will bring him to Spain. And as what I have told you earlier, that Andres Bonifacio sought help and informed Rizal about their plan to launch a revolution. But Jose Rizal never became involved in the organization and activities of the Katipunan, but the Katipuneros considered or still looked up to him as their leader. So Rizal's name was used as a code or a password among the society's highest ranking members. And Andres Bonifacio sent Valenzuela to get advice from Rizal about the revolution. And Rizal told Valenzuela that the timing was not right for a revolution because he think that the people were not yet ready and they did not have enough weapons to use. So he suggested that the Katipunan obtain the support of the wealthy and influential Filipinos first, and in order to gain financial support from them. He also recommended Antonio Luna as commander of its armed forces, since Luna had much knowledge and expertise in military tactics. So of course, after Rizal gave the advice to Valenzuela, Valenzuela as well returned to Manila on June 26 and then relayed the message to Rizal's advice to Andres Bonifacio, who admitted that it would be indeed fatal for the Filipinos to fight without even enough weapons. However, there was no stopping the revolution. Andres Bonifacio really wanted to, launch the revolution. So, the outbreak of the Philippine Revolution, the Katipunan, plot to overthrow Spanish rule by means of revolution, and that was discovered by Fray Mariano Hill Agustinian Corac of Tondo. So this startling incident struck terror into the hearts of the Spanish officials and residents, producing a hysteria of vindictive retaliation against the Filipino patriots. And on August 26, 1896, Cry of Balintawak was raised, which was raised by Bonifacio and his valiant Katipuneros in Pugad, Lawin. So, and at sunrise of August 30, the revolution led by Bonifacio and Jacinto attacked San Juan near the city of Manila, but they were repulsed with heavy losses. And in the afternoon, after the battle in San Juan, Governor General Blanco proclaimed a state of war in the first 8 provinces for rising in arms against Spain. These provinces are Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Laguna, Cavite, Batangas, Pampanga, Tarlac, and including Manila. So because of what happened, because of, Rizal already knew about the plans of Andres Bonifacio, and Rizal was worried for 2 main reasons. First, the violent revolution, which he sincerely believed to be premature and would only cause much suffering and terrible loss of human lives and property, had started. Second, it would arouse Spanish vengeance against all Filipino patriots, which is very true. And on August 30, 1896, that was the time of the departure of Rizal to Spain. So the day when the state of war was proclaimed, it was the time that Rizal will depart to Spain. And the day when the state of war was proclaimed in the 8 provinces, Rizal received from Governor General Blanco 2 letters of the introduction for the Minister of War and the Minister of Colonies, with a covering letter which absolved him from all the blame for raging revolution. So it's a sign for Rizal to go to Spain because Governor General Blanco gave him a covering letter which absolved him from all the blame for the revolution. So at 6 p.m. On September 2, Rizal was transferred. So Rizal was transferred from the cruiser Castilla to the steamer Isla de Panay, which was sailing for Barcelona, Spain. And the next morning, September 3, the steamer left Manila Bay. At last, Rizal's last trip to Spain began. And among his fellow passengers on board were Don Pedro Rojas and his son named Periquin. So on September 7, Rizal arrived in Singapore. The Isla de Panay arrived at Singapore. The following morning, Rizal and other passengers went ashore for sightseeing and shopping for souvenirs. And as what Rizal did on Dumaguete and Cebu, in the travel diary, he wrote, "I have observed some changes. There are more Chinese merchants and less Indians. I bought a Chinese gown. Singapore has changed much since I saw it for the first time in 1882. Don Pedro, with his son, disembarked at Singapore. He advised Rizal to stay to and take advantage of the protection of the British law, but of course, Rizal didn't heed his advice. And even Don Manuel Camus and several Filipino residents of Singapore advised him, urging him to stay in Singapore to save his life. But he also ignored it. He ignored the appeal because he had given his word of honor to Governor General Blanco, and he did not like to break it. That's why he didn't listen. Victim of Spanish duplicity. By refusing to break his word of honor in Singapore, Rizal sealed his own doom. It seems like he's digging his own grave. So he didn't listen to Don Pedro and to the other passengers. For without his knowledge, Governor General Blanco was secretly conspiring with the ministers of war and the minister of the colonies for his destruction. So Governor General Blanco betrayed Rizal, and great hero and genius that he was, Rizal proved to be as gullible as Sultan Zaide, another victim of Spanish intrigue. So for all his wonderful talents, Rizal was after all a mortal man who committed mistakes, and one of his greatest mistakes was to believe that Governor General Blanco was a man of honor and a friend because he had allowed him to go free as a free man to Spain to become a physician surgeon of the Spanish army in Cuba, where a bloody revolution was raging, and gave him two nice letters of introduction addressed to the Spanish ministers of war and the colonies. And on September 8, 1 p.m., the Isla de Panay with Rizal on board left Singapore, unaware of the Spanish duplicity, particularly of Governor General Blanco's infernal deceit. He happily continued the voyage towards Barcelona. On September 25, he saw the steamer Isla de Luzon leaving the Suez Canal crammed with Spanish troops. And on September 27, Sunday, 2 days later, he heard from the passengers that a telegram arrived from Manila reporting the execution of Francisco Rojas Ginato and Osorio. And on September 28, day after the steamer had left the port, a passenger told Rizal the bad news that he would be arrested by the order of the Governor General Blanco and would be sent to prison in Quetta, in Spanish Morocco. Shocked by the alarming news, Rizal belatedly realized that he was duped by the unscrupulous Spanish officials, particularly the sly Governor General Blanco. With an agonizing heart, he immediately wrote a letter to his best friend, Blumentritt, unburdening his disgust and bitterness as follows. There was nothing official yet about impending arrest. It was still merely shipboard gossip. There are people on board who do nothing but slander me and invent fanciful stories about me. I'm going to become a legendary personage. So on September 30 at 4 p.m., he was officially notified by Captain Alemany that he should stay in his cabin until further orders from Manila. He graciously complied with the captain's directive, and on September 30, at the same day at 6:25 p.m., he arrives at Spain in Barcelona as a prisoner. I saw through a tiny window the beautiful view of the port with its monumental and significant castle in 3 levels, illumined by the lingering afternoon lights. On October 3 at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Isla de Panay arrived in Barcelona. With Rizal a prisoner on board, the trip from Manila to Barcelona lasted exactly 30 days. He was kept under heavy guard in his cabin for 3 days. His jailor was no longer the ship captain but the military commander of Barcelona, who happened to be General Eugenio Despujol, the same one who ordered his banishment to the Pitan in July 1892. It was one of those coincidences in the lives of men that make history stranger than fiction. On his second day in Barcelona, Rizal, although held incommunicado in his cabin, noticed the city celebration of the feast of Saint Francis of Assisi. He recorded in his diary as follows. At 12 o'clock, I counted as many as 31 cannon shots. At 6 there were again as many. At night, there was a concert in the dining room which can be heard from my cabin. And on October 6, at 3 a.m., Rizal was awakened by the guards and escorted him to the grim and infamous prison fortress named Montjuic. He spent the whole morning in the cell, and at 2 in the afternoon, he was taken out of prison by the guards and brought to the headquarters of General Despojol. In the interview, which was lasted a quarter of an hour, the Bruce general told Rizal that he would be shipped back to Manila on board the transport ship Colon, which was leaving the evening. After the interview, Rizal was taken abroad the Colon which was full of soldiers and officers and their families. And on October 6, 8 p.m., the ship left Barcelona with Rizal on board SS Colon, or the ship Colon.
So, good day everyone. I am Hazel Liluan and I was assigned to discuss the saddest part of Rizal's life, which is his trial and execution. So, epidemic of yellow fever in Cuba. So, Rizal's warm friend, Dr. Blumentritt, wrote him from Bohemia about an epidemic of yellow fever in Cuba and the pathetic lack of doctors to attend the sick. So, Rizal kept asking Governor General Blanco for the permission to go to Cuba. So, when he least expected it, the notice came that he was to become a volunteer physician in Cuba government hospitals. So, he was again a free man, and again he was to become a wanderer. So, Rizal left the Pitan on the midnight of July 31, 1896. The Hispana arrived in the Manila Bay early morning of August 6, 1896. Unfortunately, Rizal did not catch the mail boat of Spain. So, on September 3, 1896, bearing letters of the introduction from the Governor General to the Secretaries of War and Foreign Affairs in Spain, Jose Rizal departed for Barcelona on board the Isla de Panay. So, 15 days before departure, the Katipunan was betrayed. So, on August 19, 1896, the Katipunan was discovered by Father Mariano Hill. Members and supposed members of the Katipunan were arrested and tortured until they revealed the names of the other supposed members. So, at least there were 4,377 people arrested. Bonifacio himself and most of the leaders escaped to the safe hiding places. Special military court summoned Rizal to appear before them. So when the Isla de Panay reached Juarez, a cable awaited it, ordering the immediate arrest of Jose Rizal and his return to the Manila for trial. So, on November 3, 1896, Rizal, heavily guarded, reached Manila and was locked in Fort Santiago. His brother Pasiano was tortured with a screw which was twisted into his left hand, while a pen was thrust into his right hand to make him sign a statement that his brother Rizal had been connected with the Katipunan. So, Pasiano would not sign. So, the preliminary investigation. So, after fishing as much evidence as possible, on November 20, 1896, the preliminary investigation on Rizal began. So, during the 5-day investigation, Rizal was informed of the charges against him before the judge advocate Colonel Francisco Olid. So, he was put into interrogation without the benefit of knowing who testified against him. So, presented before him were two kinds of evidences, the documentary and testimonial. There were 15 documentary evidences. These are follows. So first, a letter of Antonio Luna to Mariano Ponce. Second is a letter of Rizal to his family. Third, a letter from Marcelo H. Del Pilar to Judato Arellano. Fourth, a poem entitled Kudiman. Fifth, a letter of Carlos Oliver to an identified person. Sixth, a Masonic document. Seventh, a letter signed Dimasalang. Eighth, a letter of Dimasalang to an unidentified committee. Ninth, an anonymous and undated letter to the editor of Hong Kong Telegraph. 10th, a letter of Edelfonso Laurel to Rizal. 11th, a letter of Rizal Segundo. 12th, a letter of Marcelo H. Del Pilar to Don Juan A. Tanluz. 3rd, transcript of speech of Piangkian. 14th, transcript of speech of Tik Tik. 15, a poem by Laong Laan. So, testimonial evidences, on the other hand, were comprised of oral proofs. Dominguez, the judge advocate, transmitted the records to Don Nicolas de la Piña, the judge advocate general, for an opinion. Piña's recommendation were, first, Rizal must be immediately sent to trial. Second, he must be held in prison under necessary security. Third, his properties must be issued with order of attachment. And as indemnity, Rizal had to pay 1 million pesos. So, and lastly, instead of a civilian lawyer, only an army officer is allowed to defend Rizal. So, Rizal chose Lieutenant Luis Tabiel de Andrade as his lawyer. So, the said lieutenant was the brother of Lieutenant Jose Tabiel Andrade, who worked as Rizal's personal bodyguard in Calamba in 1887. So, on the 11th of December 1896, in the presence of his Spanish counsel, charges of Rizal's were read. On December 15, inside his cell at Port Santiago, Rizal wrote the controversial manifesto addressed to his fellow men, a letter denouncing bloody struggle and promoting education and industry as the best means to acquire independence. However, the manifesto be prohibited to be published. On December 26, about 8 o'clock in the morning, the court-martial of Rizal commenced. Unlike the other accused, Rizal was not allowed to know the people who witnessed against him. After Judge Advocate Dominguez opened the trial, it was followed by Attorney Alcocer's reiteration of the charges against Rizal, urging the court that the latter be punished with death. Accordingly, the three crimes accused to him were rebellion, sedition, and illegal association. The penalty for the first two being life imprisonment to death, while the last correctional imprisonment and charged of 325 to 3,250 pesetas. Kapitan Rafael Dominguez at 6 o'clock in the morning of December 29, 1896, read before Rizal the official notice of his execution, scheduled the next day. Rizal was immediately transferred to the prison chapel where he spent his last hours on earth. So at 3:30 in the morning of December 30, 1896, Father Balaguer led a mass for Rizal and once again made a confession and received communion. So at 5 a.m., he ate his last breakfast and autographed some memorabilia. By 6:30 a.m., Rizal marched to Bagumbayan. He is in his black suit, black necktie, black hat, black shoes, and white vest. Rizal refused to be blindfolded and insisting to face his executioners, but this was denied. Rizal was willing to show that he was no traitor and that he is ready to die for his country. So, upon hearing the squad commander's shout of fuego, which means fire, Rizal turned to face the firing squad. Rizal fell face up and was able to see the dawn breaking before he uttered in his final breath, consummatum. Allow me to read one of the quote of Rizal. Make it just, honorable, and true so that its opinion may be respected. We can win our cause by speaking the truth because right and justice are on our side. We struggled not for ourselves but for the sacred rights of mankind. We desire not blood. We have no hatred. What we have to fear. That's all. Thank you.